Before I go any further, I think I'm about done ignoring the bad fork seals in these front forks. So I'm going to get these replaced with a set that I've had around here for probably a month and I just kept ignoring it. I think that's a better idea than letting these things kill me because they're pretty much out of oil and leaking oil all over the brakes and everything else. Just got done finishing the fork seal swap, and I figured while I'm at it, I might as well go ahead and check the gear oil, change the gear oil, because everything in the gearbox is brand new. So there may be some metal shavings and such in here. Yeah, that's definitely nastier than I'd like to see, so I'm glad I'm changing it now. And here is the magnetic drain plug. Maybe you can see this. There we go. Got a little bit of debris there on the end, actually quite a bit. But that's not terribly alarming because that seems to happen anytime I've got a new gearbox. But anyway, I'll go ahead and put some fresh oil in there once this drains and then get back to the tuning. The next part of the tune that I wanted to mess with a little bit is the clutch. Basically because I think it can go harder off the line than it is right now if I can get the RPM up a little more. And as you've seen with the lighter weights, it showed me that the high RPM engagement taking off can definitely make it hit pretty hard right off the line. But when I use the lighter weights, then the RPM gets a little too high toward the higher speeds. And I don't care a whole lot about the top speed right now, but I would like to keep it at least 50-60 mile per hour capable. So I've got a stock clutch in there that's lightened, basically just drilled some holes in it, and I think 1000 RPM clutch springs. And the bell is a Hoka bell, which is more or less a stock bell, but it was just knurled inside. So that's a really basic clutch setup and something that most people would never run with the Hyper Race or anything that rests very high at all. Harleys. Anyway, I've never really owned a good clutch. I've had one performance clutch and it never impressed me very much, which may be why I just haven't bothered with other performance clutches. But kind of thought it was time that I at least tried something else. And what I decided to try just came in, and that is the Dr. Pulley HiT clutch. Seems to get really good reviews from a lot of people. Some people say this is the best clutch. I don't know, but it will at least be a good clutch, I hope. And I'm curious to see if it actually will do any good for me. Alright, so let's see what we got here. First off, here is the part number, just in case that's of any use. This is supposed to have a 107mm bell for the Minarelli engines, and it's got 50-degree pillow springs, which, as I understand it, should work well for modified engines. You can go on Dr. Pulley's site, or I actually looked on Parts for Scooter site, and they have a link to the PDF with info from Dr. Pulley, and they'll tell you all about what different setups are supposed to do. That's kind of cool. Got a little Dr. Pulley slider dude keychain here. Dr. Pulley sticker. Got basic assembly info and some information about what does what as far as springs and such. their checklist for packing. Got all of about 7 packing peanuts here. And then comes with a clutch and a clutch bell. Something else, a little spacer here. Torque spring base. There's a closer look at the clutch. Model number on there. It's very small compared to the stock clutches I'm used to. Of course, I'm used to 112mm stock clutch, but the friction material seems like a really small surface area. So anyway, there's the clutch. Here's the bell. It's kind of like the Melosi wing bell. I guess that creates a little more surface area for better cooling. Nothing really special going on the inside. It's not knurled or anything like that, but it's a really heavy duty piece. And then looks like it comes with a lot of tuning bits here. Yeah, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 sets of springs here, clutch springs and pillow springs. All of them have ratings right on the little baggies, so you can tell what they are. You can see it says pillow spring 10.5 kilogram, more pillow springs, a lot of pillow springs, clutch springs 10.5 kilogram. So it actually comes with a lot of parts. They don't try to upsell you there and make you buy, you know, $50 worth of tuning parts after you get their clutch. So I'm pretty impressed with that part, at least. Basically, for the price of the kit, it looks like you should get about everything you would need. And this was about 200 bucks. Before I even get started with the Dr. Pulley clutch, I'm going to do a quick test here. This is my timing light. I've got bungee corded to my center stand so I can actually see it in the video. And what I'm going to do is just fire up the engine with a CVT cover off using my drill in reverse, and just try to watch basically when the clutch is engaging. And it's the wheel is up in the air, the tire's in the air right now, so it's not going to take off on me. I'm not saying this is the most accurate way to tell when your clutch actually engages, but it should at least give me an idea. So if I put the Dr. Pulley clutch in and it's at way lower RPM or something than what I've got right now, then I know I'm going to have to up the springs before I even bother to test drive it. So let's see how this works. Alright, so at least based on my observation, trying to work the throttle and see both of these at the same time, it looks like this clutch is starting to get the wheel turning right around 6,000 RPM. So here's what I was using. Stock clutch, got the stock markings up here. You can see that I've lightened it just by drilling each clutch shoe, and I weighed each one to make sure they were equal weights. These are Koso aftermarket springs. I can't read the writing on them anymore, but I think these were just 1,000 RPM springs that I had in here. And there was the bell. That's a Hoka bell. You can see it was knurled inside, but that's kind of worn off over the years. But all things considered, I have no complaints over the stock clutch setup and all that I've done with the thing. You've seen it launch. It's not like it's a total turd off the line. So not bad for basically no money. Here is, since I mentioned that it looks small, especially the friction material, there's the Dr. Pulley clutch here on top versus the clutch I was using. You can see the difference in the size of the actual shoes, the friction material here. It's quite a bit larger on the stock clutch. Hopefully this does a great job and that doesn't even matter, but I was just kind of surprised to see the difference there. But I'm also not really used to the 107mm clutch being a little bit smaller diameter. And if anything, it actually looks like the Dr. Pulley clutch, even though it's for a smaller diameter, is just slightly larger because of these ribs or whatever you'd call them out here than the stock clutch or stock style clutch bell. So the Dr. Pulley clutch comes with this. They call it a torque spring washer or something like that. It's fairly similar to the Molosi torsion control, I think it's called. A little spacer that goes under there, or kind of similar to like the ball bearing bases that you can find for some clutch springs. And it's actually two pieces. So you've got this cup here and this washer here, and there's pretty much no friction that you can feel when they rotate. But it does say that in the instructions, what it says, I believe, was that it's for strengthening the torque spring. In my case, I really don't want to strengthen my torque spring because I think this thing is plenty stiff enough at the moment. If that changes, I'll use this. I don't think it's a bad idea to use this, but I also don't want to, well, it wouldn't matter because it doesn't fit around the Molosi pulley. I'd have to machine the thing just to fit around the pulley. So even more reason not to use it right now. Yeah, even the washer wouldn't actually fit. I don't even know if that would fit on my spring, to be honest, because these OR springs are a little larger. So I'm just going to find out. That would actually cover the spring. So it works that way. It's just too large of a diameter if I were to use it down there like they say. So for now, I'm just going to put the pulley, or excuse me, the clutch right on top of the spring here without their suggested washer. So I actually just put the bell over this, and I see that the clutch comes down lower than the bell here. And that just reminded me that I should check this for clearance before I put it all together. Because sometimes when this pulley opens, it can actually run into a clutch or a bell, and that can limit the travel that you have for your rear pulley. Kind of hard to check sometimes with a spring in place. I'm going to go ahead and take it back apart, take the spring out, and then we'll check. Okay, so no spring installed here, just setting the clutch on top of the rear pulley. And then, real simple check, I'm going to open up my rear pulley and just see if it pushes the clutch up at all, if it touches the clutch or pushes it up. Alright, so hopefully you can see from this angle, when I get all the way up, it just moves the clutch a tiny bit, not very much, but it is making a small amount of contact with it, and that is the speed end of the travel, so where you'd be at the higher speed. And if it stops it there, then that could restrict your speed a little bit. And obviously I don't want restrictions anywhere from parts, so what I'm going to do is try to use a spacer to raise the clutch up a little higher off the pulley. And I actually already have one in place here that I had made up for the stock clutch because it would run into the stock clutch otherwise. So I might have to see if I can make something thicker or maybe just add another spacer. I'm not sure what I'll do yet, but definitely got to raise it up a little bit to make sure there's no restriction. And I actually had a spare around that I had made when I did this washer, and it has a lip left over on it from machining that I couldn't take off on the lathe because this got so thin. So that has to be cut out. But I actually tried to give those things away when I made them to see if they would help anybody else. And not really many people wanted them, so I still had one left here. And I won't have to go through all of that to make one again. I just gotta grind this little lip off so it'll actually fit over there. Actually, I think I'm gonna see if I can take that little lip off with a boring tool here instead of just trying to grind it. That might be a little easier for me. I'm not sure why I didn't do that before. Maybe I'll find out. Yeah, that was much easier than having to get the grinder out. And I'll just do some quick filing there to smooth the edge out, and that'll be it. After quick filing and sanding, that'll slide over there. I should note, I made these custom on the lathe, and if you do this kind of spacer, you have to be conscious of the outer diameter of it versus the outside diameter of the shaft here, because if it has a larger diameter, it can actually stop the rear pulley from getting full travel. In this case, it's spaced up, it's sitting on top of another spacer, and the pulley can't even travel that high anyway, even if it were larger. But you definitely have to pay attention to all the details when you do this kind of stuff, or you can end up creating a different restriction. So anyway, I'm going to put the clutch on top of there now, and we'll see what happens. And now it looks okay to me. I don't have tons of thread left on top of there. See if I can get that in the shot. So I don't think it's going to make a whole lot of difference, because maybe I can make it a ½ millimeter shorter or something like that and still not have contact. But I'm just not real happy with how much of the thread gets taken up because of the spacers. So I'm going to go ahead and try to make another spacer, and like I said, maybe it'll be a slight improvement in just the threads available for the clutch nut. So I actually ended up cutting a few spacers to see what I could make work, and what I ended up with is this, which is about 1.3 millimeters thick, and the two that I had stacked before were 1.65 millimeters or so. So it's not really much difference. It saves 0.35 millimeters of thread sticking out of the top here. Probably essentially makes no difference, but makes me feel a little better. And that's enough that it now doesn't contact. Well, I've got another problem. So Malossi supplies this spacer here that goes over your drive shaft, because generally the clutch will run into the clutch bell without it because of the way this pulley's set up, I guess. So that's always worked fine for me with my stock clutch, but then when I put this one on here, if I even hold a little pressure against it, I can feel that it's binding up. So I'm going to have to space that out more. Well, luckily for me, I had a couple of different spacers that are actually thicker. They weren't for that, I can't remember what they were for, but they're a pretty decent match. And if that hadn't worked out, or doesn't work out, these Naraku shims for the variator that I bought, for the 13 millimeter variator, they actually would work as well. So now it's just a matter of finding out exactly how much spacing I need to get the clearance for this bell to be able to spin freely. now. Okay, let's see if I can use a thinner one. There we go. Okay, problem solved. Now the next issue is I'm pushing everything outward, and now I've barely got any threads for the clutch nut. What I've done is I've just taken the clutch bell, put it over the clutch, put pressure in the center, and then I'm just twisting them together because I'm trying to see if it leaves any marks so I can tell exactly what's contacting. And then when I take that off, hopefully you can see with the light, there's a ring around here, right near the outer edge of the clutch bell on the inside. And then when I look at the clutch itself, it appears that these edges right here on this plate, on these plates on top, I can see where the paint is worn off just of the edges of those. So while I'm not really a fan of it, I'm wondering if I would be able to just grind off those edges, and if that would be enough that maybe I could then use slightly less spacing, and that would give me a little more thread left over for my clutch nut. And I don't think this is a huge issue because, again, this is making most of the contact it would need, but it's always nice if you can get more threads in contact. Not much removed there. Very, very little, just kind of putting a taper on the end of each one. And I'm hoping maybe it'll just let me take out the thin plate if I can take just enough off of there. So I'm going to try just the thicker of the two washers, or spacers. That actually seems to spin pretty free. Try the thin one, see what happens. Don't think this is going to work, but try. No. Now it's got me wondering how close it is, so it would be really nice to be able to use the thin spacer and keep that extra millimeter-ish of thread here. So I'm going to go try to take just a little more off of here and see what happens. So there's a close look after the second time grinding, taking just a little more off, just putting a little more of a taper on the end there. Trying the thin spacer again. That's not far off. If I can use that thin spacer, that's much better for this clutch nut's contact. So I'm going to go at it again, because I really don't think I'm taking off anything critical here. It appears that all the work is being done closer towards center. Hopefully I'm not wrong and the clutch blows apart, but I'm going to find out. It seems like it's really close after that one more try, but what I've done is just put some marked each one of those areas that I clearanced before with black marker. And I'm going to put this back on, use the thin spacer again, put the clutch bell on, and then spin it, and I'm hoping maybe that will show me where there is that slight contact. It's very slight right now, it seems like. So I'm not seeing where it's removing any marker, but it's really close. But I'm not going to take a lot more off of there. I don't want to grind those totally away. I'm just trying to save as much as I can for the threads out here. Go ahead and tighten this up a little bit. Put even pressure on it and see what it does. now I don't, there's something very slight happening in there. It's just barely making contact. So I think what I'll do is see what I can get that's close to the thinnest spacer using these Naraku variator spacers. So this is the Melosi supplied spacer, and that is a little over 0.4 millimeters. Maybe I'll get lucky and they've got a 0.5 in here that works or something. Alright, well that's super thin. That's about 0.1 millimeters. So I'm going to put the 0.1 millimeter spacer on here and then use the 0.4 whatever millimeter spacer over that. Let's see how that goes. It seems that that is enough. I don't notice any contact there. That seems to spin pretty freely. Just to be certain, I will tighten that down. Still seems okay. So I guess I'm going to proceed with that. And I know that's, a lot of this stuff probably seems really particular, picky, whatever. But if I went with this one, that's 1.3 millimeters. So I had to use that one as well as the thin one. So like 1.7-ish millimeters there. Versus now I've got about 0.6 millimeters. So that saves a little bit of the threads here. Plus, with what I did earlier for the spacing of the clutch, that saves a little more. I know it doesn't seem like a big deal, but it's got to help some. Let me fire this thing up and we'll see how the engagement as set up compares to what my modified stock clutch was. Well, it looks like at least by 5,000 RPM it's trying to get the tire spinning pretty decent, so I definitely need stiffer clutch springs in there. Well, I know I want stiffer springs than what it has in here now. I just am assuming that because they're the same color, they've just provided spares of these 10.5 kilogram springs. I can't find any information that's clear to me on exactly what these are. So I'm going to assume they're 10.5 kilogram. And then I've got 14, 16, and 19 kilogram springs to choose from. At this point, my thought is just see what happens when you go big. So I'm going to put in these 19 kilogram clutch springs, the stiffest thing that's included with the kit. I'm going to make sure I keep these separate in a labeled bag here just in case I'm wrong about what they are. That wasn't too bad. Well, if I'm honest, that's a little bit disappointing. Might do something totally different once there's actually load on the system here. You know, the wheel's on the ground, it's got weight trying to push. But right now, it looks like it's not that much different than what I had out of a stock Lighten clutch, and I actually had stiffer springs left for my stock Lighten clutch. So I'm going to put it back together and see what it does on the road. doesn't feel like it's running as clean as it normally does, but again, temperature decides to go up 20 degrees. But I can't even get it to pick the wheel up, which is terribly disappointing. Sit all the way back here. There's too much lag. That sucks. So, first impression is that sucks. I'm hoping this is a function of the pillow springs that's making it a soft hit. And maybe I can either go with really soft pillow springs or just take them out totally, and that'll turn it around to something that I actually like. Well, when I took the cover off, the first thing I noticed is I've got a little bit of noise here, like something's hitting. So I'm going to try just a slightly thicker spacer in there and see if that clears it up. Alright, that seems okay again. Looking at these springs, and while I've got the yellow stiffest clutch springs, these red pillow springs that are listed as 24 kilogram while my clutch springs are 19 kilograms look to be the same thing as the clutch spring. So the pillow springs and clutch springs at least look the same to me. I don't know if they will be, but I think before I go ahead and take the pillow springs out, I just want to see what these red springs will do in place of my yellow clutch springs. It's still not far off of 6,000, somewhere in that range. Very dry, and it's been about 90, which is cooling down now, but it's still not mattering. At this point, I basically just swapped main jets down until it stopped breaking up really bad. So that doesn't necessarily mean it's in tune, but I haven't had a great desire to go any leaner than I have to. And I could still probably work with a needle as well, but when I hold it wide open, it's not liking it, so that makes me want to change the main jet. So I'm just going to go from a 108 to a 105. If I can get it to just stop slipping so much, might be okay. Well, it definitely felt a lot better with the 105 main jet swapped in from the 108. Ran a lot cleaner. That's the best I think I've ever felt it feel on the top end. So I think that was a good change regardless. Even with it feeling better than it has before, I still don't think it did any more than it would with the modified stock clutch. So gonna go ahead and take the CVT cover off, and I'll remove the pillow springs so it hits as hard as it can, and then I'll try it. But I think I'm gonna wait for tomorrow because I think I've probably annoyed my neighbors enough for today and tonight.